Okay, everybody, just to let Patrick and Cyril know, I just got a message from Donald from IT Carlo. He's logging in, but he said for us to start the session and then he'll join us momentarily. Okay. So what I think we'll do, everybody, is we'll get started here. As I was mentioning to the gentleman that was just on the audio, we will be recording this session up until the breakout rooms. And then from that point, we can't actually record the individual breakout rooms. So, okay, so we'll go ahead here and I welcome everybody to today's session. Sorry. Oh, hold on. Donald's just jumped in, so I'm just gonna let him in here. Okay, so Donald should be coming in here soon. Okay. So as Donald logs in, I just want to welcome everybody to today's session with KOM Consultants and our Irish partner schools, IT Tralee or MTU, IT Sligo, and IT Carlo. My name is Martin Kelly, and I'm the director here at KOM Consultants. And really the purpose of this session is to give you guys information on what September is going to look like for those that are attending one of these three Irish institutions. So what we're going to do, I'll give you a little rundown of how the format's going to work, is Patrick Lynch from IT Sligo, I believe, will be doing a brief PowerPoint presentation on the COVID regulations and how things are going to look in September. We're then going to open it up into a breakout room, or first, before we go to the breakout room, we're going to open it up into questions and answers that are generic to everybody. And then what we're going to do is open up breakout rooms for each of the individual schools. So if you're going to IT Tralee or Sligo, you can then go into those schools and ask the questions specific to those individual representatives. I just wanted to remind everybody that are going to these schools that you should have received Facebook links for the various groups. So if you're going to IT Tralee, you should get a Facebook link in your email for a Facebook group for all the Canadians that are attending that school. The same for Sligo and the same for Carlo. Okay, so what I'll do at this point is I'll just pass over quick little introductions to the Irish gentlemen that are joining us. So Cyril, perhaps you can say a quick hello.
Hi everyone, you're all welcome to this webinar. My name is Cyril Gavahan. I'm representing the Institute of Technology Tralee, or Munster Technological University, Kerry, as we are now known.
Thanks, Cyril. Donald, are you on here? Can you say a quick hello?
Can you hear me, Martin?
Yep, you're coming in.
Okay,
fine.
great. Yeah, I'm on. I've had to go onto my phone this evening. I've run into some serious technical issues, so apologies for the delay, and looking forward to the session.
Thanks, Donald. And then I'll introduce Patrick Lynch from IT Sligo.
Hey everybody, Patrick here, as Martin said, from IT Sligo. So I'm delighted to be, I suppose, steering the initial presentation this evening. While it's on IT Sligo letterhead, basically it covers all of the substantive kind of COVID issues for all three institutions. I think at the end of the presentation, Martin, we're going to have some Q&A, and I know that you have received some questions in advance, so that'll kind of go to either one of the panel members. So without further ado, I'll start, if I may, unless Martin, you want to do anything else in terms of order?
I was just going to ask everybody, can everybody hear Patrick okay? If you want to just say yes or...
So
okay, Patrick, so it looks like your audio is coming in fine. And again, we're going to be recording this for future sessions. So I'll hand it over to you, Patrick, and then I'll jump back on at the end of your presentation here. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Okay, good afternoon or good evening, everybody from Ireland. Hopefully you'll be able to, you can see my screen here in front of me. I'm trying to share it. Okay, so just a couple of I suppose the format of the presentation itself, just to go quickly run through some next steps for conditional offer holders, next steps for unconditional offer holders, an update on COVID-19 and the current status in Ireland, an update on the current travel restrictions in Ireland, but more importantly, we will be signposting likely or probable changes to those travel restrictions based on a national protocol for the safe return and management of international students to Ireland, which is currently under discussion, and I think we're almost at a final draft at this stage. So we'll give you a sneak peek of what that is likely to look like, and it will be subject to final governmental approval. We've been feeding into that discussion process, and that will have implications in terms of an easing of restrictions and requirements when it comes to mandatory quarantine. We'll give you a little idea about what the academic calendar is going to look like for 2021-2022. Just bear in mind there may be different start dates across the 3 institutions. And then finally, we move into some questions and answers. Martin already has received a number of questions in advance. Hopefully the presentation will answer quite a lot of those, and then we can move into the breakout room. So that's the format for this evening's session. So in terms of next steps for conditional offer holders, I suppose step 1 is you're either deciding to accept, defer, or decline that particular offer. Step 2 is to pay a refundable €1,000 deposit, and that confers a tuition fee reduction of a further €500 for all applicants. I think in light of COVID-19, I think all 3 institutions have decided to automatically confer that €500 further reduction in tuition. And most importantly, you need to send in your final transcript of results. You can send them either directly to the 3 institutions or indeed directly to KOM consultants. I know some of you have been having problems accessing your official certified transcript of results. I think all 3 institutions will accept an unofficial transcript of result that can be printed off your student portal. So if you are experiencing difficulties with registry functions at your home college, and you're experiencing delays in receiving your certified final transcript, you can print off your unofficial transcript and send those to either of the individual institutions or indeed to KOM direct. That then elicits what's called your unconditional offer letter, and then you must follow the acceptance instructions attached to the unconditional offer letter, which includes instructions to pay tuition. Next steps for unconditional offer holders, again, it's accept, defer, or decline. Again, make sure that you pay that refundable €1,000 deposit that's reserved your seat on the programme. And then you take the necessary steps as outlined in the offer letter to pay your tuition. In IT Sligo's case, you have an option of paying through TransferMate or Flywire. No doubt my colleagues have similar, if not the same, payment methodologies available to you. Okay, so COVID-19, what's the current situation in Ireland? As from the 13th of June, our 14-day national incident rate has dropped significantly. It's just slightly above 100 cases per 100,000 people. On the 10th of May, we started a phased reopening of the economy. So everything from the hospitality sector is opening, and for both, currently it's outdoor dining. It will move into indoor dining in the next few weeks. There's unlimited inter-county travel within Ireland. There's essential and non-essential retail are all fully open. And on the 19th of July, non-essential international travel will resume. Vaccination rollout is continuing apace. So there are 4 approved vaccines in Ireland: Pfizer-BioNTech, AstraZeneca, the Johnson & Johnson or Janssen mRNA vaccine, and the Moderna vaccine. By the end of June, 82% of the adult population in Ireland will have received at least 1 vaccine dose. An important information source if you want to keep abreast of all COVID-19 happenings in Ireland is www.gov.ie/COVID. So what are the current travel restrictions for non-European citizens arriving in Ireland? And so these are the current restrictions that are in place, and please bear in mind the rest of the session we will actually deal with what's likely to change from the current status. So the current status is such that anybody arriving or transiting through Canada into Ireland must have a negative PCR test within 72 hours of arrival. Canada at the moment is on what's called a Category 2 list of countries. And so under the current guidelines, arrivals from Canada into Ireland have to undergo mandatory hotel quarantine. However, that is likely to change based on the signposting that we are in discussions with regard to the proposed travel restrictions, which we'll deal with later on in the presentation. All arrivals into Ireland are required to complete a passenger locator form. So basically the public health authorities can monitor where you're staying and to ensure that you're completing quarantine arrangements insofar as they relate to home quarantine. You're obliged to download the COVID-19 tracker app, and so that's available on Android or Apple. And again, keep abreast of all public health measures and guidance. Again, that's available on the information source gov.ie/COVID. So that's the current non-EU travel restrictions insofar as they relate to Canada, or people arriving or transiting through Canada into Ireland. So what are the proposed non-EU travel restrictions in terms of a draft protocol? So this is so basically, if you're arriving from Canada and you have proof of full vaccination, it's most likely that all you'll be required to do is simply download the tracker app and follow all public health guidance. So no quarantine will be required if you're fully vaccinated. Please bear in mind that these are proposed, they're draft protocols, they haven't been formally signed off yet, and I stress yet, and they're likely to be announced in the coming weeks. If you're coming from Canada and you don't have proof of vaccination, in other words, any of the 4 vaccinations that we've mentioned earlier on, so Moderna, the Janssen or Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer-BioNTech, or the AstraZeneca vaccination. And when we say proof of vaccination, if it's 2 shots, you need to have 2 shots. So if you've no proof of vaccination, you need to have a negative PCR test within 72 hours of arrival in Ireland. And this is the difference. Under the proposals, what we're seeing at the moment, which haven't yet been signed off, you will no longer be required to undertake mandatory hotel quarantine. You would have to self-quarantine at your place of residence, whether that's in Carlow, Tralee or Sligo, and for a period of 14 days. You will be obliged to undertake a post-arrival PCR test, which the institutions themselves will manage and arrange for you. And if that's a negative test, after 5 days of post your arrival, you can exit the self-quarantine. There will also be a managed airport collection service, and all of the institutions will provide details of that when it becomes known to ourselves. So you will be able to complete a form, fill in your arrival details, and we'll ensure that you can transit safely from Dublin Airport directly to Tralee, Carlow or Sligo. There is a provision within the draft protocols that if the COVID-19 situation deteriorates significantly in any non-European country, Ireland can put in what's called an emergency brake for those countries. And there are more stringent protocols to go through depending on whether you have proof of full vaccination or no proof of vaccination. I don't propose to go through them at the moment, because it is our fervent hope and wish that Canada will not be listed within these emergency brake countries at any stage between now and September, and therefore would fall under the more simplified regime of whether you have, if you have full vaccination, in other words, if that's Pfizer-BioNTech, or if it's Moderna, or if it's AstraZeneca, you've got both shots. If it's Johnson & Johnson, you have 1 shot. You'll simply be required to download the tracker app and follow the public health guidance. In other words, that's basically simple things like wearing a mask, avoiding crowds, and undertaking hand hygiene measures, all of those kind of things. If you don't have proof of full vaccination, in other words, you've only 1 shot or you don't have any shot of the 2-shot vaccines, you will be required to undertake a negative PCR test within 72 hours of departure. Instead of doing mandatory hotel quarantine, you can quarantine at your place of residence, whether that's Sligo, Tralee or Carlow. You will be obliged to undertake a post-arrival PCR test, most probably at the end of day 5 post-arrival. That'll be arranged and managed by the institution. If that comes back negative, you will then be able to exit self-quarantine, and all of the 3 institutions will be obliged under this, again I stress, draft protocol, to undertake managed airport collection. Again, every arrival coming into Ireland must complete the passenger locator form, must download the COVID-19 tracker app, and should follow and keep up to date with all of the public health advice as detailed in gov.ie /COVID. Again, I need to re-emphasize that these protocols are draft at the moment, and they are expected to come into force, but all of the three institutions in conjunction with KOM will send out appropriate communications when this draft protocol or any amendment thereto is brought into force. But I suppose signposting the proposed restrictions are certainly less stringent than what currently applied to Category 2 list countries such as Canada, which at the moment require mandatory hotel quarantine. It's likely that that will no longer be required under the draft protocol as you see in front of you. So that's kind of a simplified, I suppose, schematic or diagram. Again, you'll see here in the center of the screen, passengers arriving from outside the EU, from Canada that are not on an emergency break country under this proposed protocol. If you proof of full vaccination, all you need to do is simply adhere to the standard public health measures and download the complete the passenger locator form and download the app. If you've no proof of full vaccination, you'll be required to undertake a negative PCR test within 72 hours before arrival. You undertake self-quarantine at your place of residence, and you undergo a post-arrival HSE PCR test on day 5. If that's negative, and then you can exit a self-quarantine. And there will be managed airport collection. Each of the institutions will provide support during your self-quarantine period. So that will be in terms of advice, practical advice in terms of how to online shop, things like that. Making sure that you've access to student counselling facilities, and indeed, if you're experiencing any symptoms, and that you've access to the medical centres and the medical teams through each of the institutions who can arrange a COVID test if you're experiencing any symptoms. So again, I must stress that this is a draft protocol at the moment, and I would say that it's more than likely or probable that these revised and less stringent measures will be brought in the coming weeks. So what's the academic year going to look like? Well, I've mentioned the national protocol, which is currently in draft form. It's likely to feature managed airport transfer, as I mentioned earlier on, student support during the self-quarantine period, post-arrival PCR tests, so most likely on day 5 and possibly day 10 of the quarantine period, depending on whether you're coming from an emergency break country or not. You'll always have free access to the public health system for treatment for COVID-19 related symptoms, if you have it. And it is likely, not confirmed, but it is likely that international students will have vaccine, if they're not vaccinated, will have access to vaccines. That's subject to confirmation. Again, it's still under consideration at government level. We will communicate an appropriate response to that once it becomes known to the institutions. In the case of the academic calendar for IT Sligo, orientation will commence during the week commencing the 13th of September. Classes will start during the week commencing the 20th of September. Orientation in the main will probably happen online, okay? So you'll be able to access your orientation, complete your registration, get familiar with our learning management system, our library, sending up your email. You can do all of that remotely, and there will be some activities on campus, and you'll have the opportunity to view the facilities in terms of campus tours and smaller pods, most likely. And you will have the opportunity, obviously, to meet the lecturing staff in various introductory sessions as well. In terms of teaching delivery, the government, less than 48 hours ago, announced that there will be a return to campus in 2021, 2022. So what will that look like? It's effectively a greater on-campus teaching delivery, particularly during the autumn semester. It's most likely that that will be blended with significant on-campus presence, obviously, for those programs that have practical elements, workshops, labs, whether they're computing labs, whether they're engineering labs, or whether they're architectural design studios, or whether they're science labs. And then we anticipate an increasing on-campus presence as we move through the autumn semester into full on-campus teaching, hopefully for the spring semester. So that's the outlook. And please bear in mind the percentage of on-campus teaching may vary from program to program, particularly during the initial stages of the autumn semester. The reason for that is, I suppose, the prevalence of some international variants of concern when it comes to COVID-19, and the very fact that the 18 to 25-year-old population won't receive at least their first vaccination in Ireland possibly until September/October time. So that cohort of the population won't be fully vaccinated. If, and we anticipate international students will have access to the vaccines, most likely they will have access in accordance with the age population that in terms of the national vaccination rollout. So if you're within that 18 to 25 cohort, it is likely that you won't get access to the vaccine until at least probably the month of October, based on current projections. Again, this is also subject to sign off at national level. What I would ask is everybody please stay informed, so keep up to date with all the public health advice. So that's www.gov.ie/COVID. And please keep in contact with the respective international offices. So from IT Sligo's perspective, that's international office at itsligo.ie. I'm going to ask maybe my colleagues Cyril Gavin and Donald McAllister to maybe type into the chat box their respective contact emails, and so you can keep in contact directly with the international offices in Tralee and Carlow. Please keep in contact with Martin and his team at KOM, so toll-free number 877-318-8203, or email studentservices@komconsultants.com. So hopefully you've found the slides informative this evening. I propose to leave the slides up just in case anybody wants me to navigate back through them, if that's okay, Martin. And maybe we can open up for Q&A. Perhaps we could start, Martin, with maybe you reading some of the questions that you've received so far, and then maybe Donald, Cyril, or indeed myself can answer those if they haven't been covered off within the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. And perhaps you could send over this PowerPoint and we could send it out to everybody that's participated in today. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we are recording this session up until the breakout room, so everything that you've heard so far will be in the recording. But as we go into the question and answer period, I just want to go over some of the questions that we're receiving at the office repeatedly. Some of them you may have addressed, Patrick. One of the questions is, and I know it's uncertain whether they're going to need hotel quarantine. How do they book that if that's the case? Do we know that information at this point?
Yeah, hi Martin. It's unlikely that Canadian citizens will have to go through mandatory hotel quarantine. They're the current regulations. But as you see in front of you here, under the draft protocol, it's most likely, my understanding is the 18 to 25-year-old population, particularly in Canada, won't be fully vaccinated by the time they have to travel over to Ireland. I think that's the case. And if that's the case, they won't have full proof of vaccination, and therefore will be, under the revised protocol, would only have to have a negative PCR test within 72 hours of arrival, and would have to undergo self-quarantine at their place of residence, whether that's Sligo, Tralee or Carlow, and then would have to undergo a facilitated post-arrival HSE PCR test. So HSE is the health service executive here in Ireland. So the relevant medical or student supports would actually arrange that for the students directly. However, if mandatory hotel quarantine does remain in place, and that's currently the situation, they can book that online. There is a national portal. My understanding is you can't actually book that until at least a week before you arrive. So we can share that information directly. So it's not something to immediately worry about. The practical situation is, and my colleagues can back me up on this, my understanding is that the hotel capacity is as little as 1,500 rooms for mandatory hotel quarantine. So if you do the math, in pre-COVID times, there were anywhere upwards of 40,000 international students in Ireland. If one assumes that even as little as 10% of those are returning or coming from Category 2 list countries, there ain't enough bed spaces for students to avail of mandatory hotel quarantine, even if they're on a Category 2 list. So given the pace of vaccination rollout in Ireland, the fact that over 82% of adult Male or females will have at least one vaccination shot by the end of June. You can see the phase reopening has started to gather pace, and that's feeding into the resumption of non-essential international travel for Irish nationals as from the 19th of July. And it's also feeding into the discussion here with regard to the draft protocol, which, if signed off, as we see in front of us here, would mean that Canadian citizens or people transiting through or from Canada would not have to undergo mandatory hotel quarantine. But if that's not the case, and the current regulations stay in place, they can book that online. We can provide the links for that, but my understanding is you can't book that until at least until you're about a week before your arrival.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick.
Sorry, Martin. Can I just say, Martin, there are two magic numbers involved here. Number one is 80%. Once we hit the level of 80% vaccination, whether in Ireland or Canada, it's what's called herd immunity. And as of the 19th of July, the entire EU should have hit that figure. By the 19th of July, Ireland is going to align with the rest of the European Union in terms of opening up international travel. We have been very conservative up to this for one reason, primarily, that we have a land border with a non-EU state at this stage. As of the 19th of July, we're going to align again with the European Union, and therefore almost certainly Canada is going to be taken off the designated category list, and therefore mandatory hotel quarantine will not be necessary. I think the worst case scenario for the students coming over in September, and as Patrick says, this hasn't been signed off on yet, and it has to go through all the red tape and so on. But the worst case scenario will be that it'll be the same as last year, 14 days self-isolation. I think even that won't be necessary because, as Patrick says, PCR tests will be permissible, that the colleges will organise within 5 days of their arrival, and even at that, therefore, they will be released from self-isolation.
Okay, thanks, Cyril. One of the questions we're asked repeatedly is about flights and when they should book the flights to arrive. I know in the past, some of the schools have hired coach buses and asked students to come on a particular day to go on the coach bus to travel up to whichever school they're going to. Does anybody have any opinion on how that may work for airport reception and how students get to the various campuses?
If I can step in there, if you can hear me okay. So basically last year we had the protocol that led to a meet and greet service being delivered at Dublin Airport, which dealt with arrivals of new students. That is up for discussion at the moment. So it's not 100% clear right at this very moment in time how it'll work. It may be a meet and greet service that we coordinate with to arrange the transport of students to the appropriate accommodations in either Sligo, Tralee or Carlow. Or it could be that each institution is tasked with looking after their own specific arrivals. That's up for discussion at the moment nationally. Decisions will be made on that in the next couple of weeks. So it's not altogether clear at this moment in time, but it will become clear probably by the end of the month.
Thanks, Donald.
Yeah,
so
just to reiterate what Donald says there, apologies, Mark, I couldn't cross you there. See under the draft protocol that the institutions are obliged under the draft protocol to manage airport collection. Whether that's a centralised national service or whether it's put on by Carlow, Tralee or Sligo independently, the three institutions will be providing an airport collection service. Will be circulating probably electronic forms or a link where you just simply input your details and your date of arrival. And we may specify preferred dates, but don't worry about it. If you're coming in on an odd date, under the protocol that the institution has to sign up and all the presidents have to sign up, don't rest assured there'll be nobody lost in this. We'll collect you and we'll bring you safely to Carlow, Tralee or Sligo. In terms of when they should arrive, Martin, in the case of IT Sligo, orientation is, I think, is scheduled for 15th, 16th and 17th. So that's during the week commencing the 13th. And ideally, if they arrive, classes don't start until the 20th. So if they arrive any time during the first week in September, that's enough time. That's plenty of time. And I would imagine it's probably a similar story for Cyril and Donald.
Our academic calendar is the same as Sligo's. Class starts on the 20th. Orientation week is the 13th. International orientation is scheduled for 15, 16, 17. So therefore, if they have arrived 14 days before the 20th, that's sufficient, for the simple reason that orientation, induction is all going to be online anyway. So even if they have to self-isolate for 14 days, that can be done during induction primarily. Now, in this case, we're hoping that we'll be in a position to bring the students onto campus before the first day they have to turn up in class or tutorial or lecture or what have you, during that week of the 13th, but that might not be necessary.
Yeah,
Thanks,
and
Cyril.
Carlo, exactly the same. Yeah, sorry, Martin. Yeah, Carlo is pretty much, I still have to get the formal calendar, still has to be approved, but informally, I'm told it's the same dates, the 13th for orientation and 20th then for the start of class.
Okay, thanks, Donald. So one of the other questions, as we're talking about the COVID and whatnot, it surrounds medical insurance and when they should be arranging medical insurance and how they do this. Is it something that they can do through the links on the offer letters, and when should they be doing this?
Well, generally speaking, you don't book your insurance until quite close to travel time. And I know from Carlo's perspective, we have the travel insurance offer, or not the travel, the medical insurance product is linked onto our website. So any student coming to us can simply go onto that and book it. Same, I'm sure, with Sligo and MTU Tralee. Students, there is a debate about insurance, and it's more to do with students who are coming for more than 1 year. And most of the students on this call will be coming just for 1 year. So if someone's coming for more than 1 year, they can contact each of the institutions themselves to discuss what product they should be going for. But anyone coming for 1 year, it's just simply through the links that each institution would have up.
Thanks, Donald. Some of the students are coming into programs that may have placements involved in them. Does anybody have any ideas how those placements might work? A few particular programs have placements in their first term when they arrive in Ireland. That's how it was played out in previous years. So I'm not sure how those placements would work as we're going into September.
In the past, some of our students would have come into, particularly the early childhood education students who came to us for year 3, would have started off in a work placement. That has actually been flipped for this year, for all future years. So now they come into a classroom situation for the first semester, and then they go on work placement. There's essentially has been a guarantee by our government for the last 2 years, right through COVID, that they will keep preschool education and early school years education open. And they have managed to do that fairly effectively ever since. One of the logic, so originally, of keeping preschool education open was that the first line workers needed to have somebody to look after their children so that they could work on the front line themselves. And therefore, kindergarten education has always been open. So that won't be a problem. For most other students, it'll be the exact same as last year. It'll be a combination of some on-site and some online activity or remote working, just like so many people in industry themselves are doing it. So they're getting practical education anyway.
Thanks, Cyril. I've just got 2 more on my list. They're more housekeeping questions. Students are asking about cell phones, how those would work when they arrive in Ireland, and banking. Do they open up a bank account once they arrive at the school? And how would they use their monies for buying things and things like that? So maybe somebody can touch on that.
I'll take that one, Martin, if that's okay, folks. And when it comes to mobile phone or self plans, most important thing is to make sure that the student come and bring their mobile phone in an unlocked fashion. So they need to unlock their phones, in other words, and make sure that the phone isn't linked to TELUS or Bell or whatever directly. Make sure the phone is unlocked, and you can get unlimited data in Ireland without a contract, unlimited SMS and unlimited international calls for as little as 10 or 12 euros a month. In some instances, depending on, it can be somewhere between 10 to 20 euros a month. So anything from 3 to Vodafone to Tesco Mobile to Gomo Mobile to, there's loads of them out there, EE, Air, there's loads of them. And so all you need to do is make sure you bring your phone in an unlocked fashion. You just go to any of the high street stores, whether they're in Carlow or Tralee, or in Sligo and just purchase a prepaid SIM where you just top up monthly for unlimited data, unlimited SMS, text, and unlimited calls, for somewhere between 10 or 20 euros per month, depending on the type of plan, the type of package that you would like to use. Most people won't be using text messages. Most people won't be using calls. Most people will be using Wi-Fi or their 4G to FaceTime back home or to call their colleagues. So significantly cheaper than Canada, I believe. And in terms of banking, all of the international offices will assist with letters and things like that. Most of us, I think all the campuses have a bank branch on campus. Hopefully they will be reopening when we come in September. Just to reiterate, while Canadian students aren't student study visa required to enter Ireland, they will be obligated to register with immigration within 90 days of arrival, and they will need to show they have access to a minimum of €3,000 to sustain their stay here. And how they provide that is by way of a bank statement. So that can be a digital copy of an existing bank statement that they have denominated in Canadian dollars, for argument's sake, whether that's Royal Bank of Canada or otherwise. So you can use that, or you can, most people will actually open up an Irish bank account here, or do what most people are doing now, embrace fintech and use Revolut or something like that, but we will assist, the offices will assist with opening a bank account. Most people would do that during the week of orientation and get that out of the way, and would actually arrange for their immigration appointment at the local police station, either Carlow, Tralee or Sligo. You have within 90 days to do that, but most people will get that out of the way, I suppose, post self-quarantine being completed.
Thanks, Patrick. And just to clarify with the students, with the registering with the immigration, that'll all be covered at the orientation at the various schools. So you don't have to worry too much about that. At this point, maybe what you can do, Patrick, is unshare your screen so the text box might be a little clearer for people. And we can open up the floor to questions and answers for generic ones. And once we're through with that, we can open up the breakout rooms, and then students and parents can go into the various breakout rooms. So if anybody has any questions right now, feel free to unmute your microphone or to type in the chat box there.
Which airport are they flying into?
Dublin.
Dublin?
Yeah, essentially, at the moment, with the way things are during COVID and in the aftermath of COVID, Dublin is going to be the hub for most arrivals into Ireland. So you would be arriving in Dublin from Toronto, from Montreal. There's assumptions there that carriers will pick up the flight schedules as things ease, but that would be the normal route. Kimberly's saying a lot of flights from Toronto to Dublin have stopovers. That's probably a factor of what's been going on with the flight schedules with COVID. But in general terms, there's 3 airlines that fly regularly between Ireland and Canada. Aer Lingus, which is the Irish national airline, Air Canada, and Air Transat. So all of those normally fly regularly from Ontario to Dublin Airport, and there'll be an expectation as things start to roll out that those schedules will start to pick up again. But I'm not surprised to see that maybe some of the things you're looking at online are showing you, based on current availability, that there are stopovers. But generally speaking, you should be able to fly directly into Dublin. As Patrick has just said in the text box, just be careful on any transit arrangements in a country that you do land in. If you do happen to book a flight that goes through another country, just make sure you're aware of what the arrangements are in that country for arrivals and for transit. Okay.
Thanks, Donald. There's a couple of questions that have come in through the chat box. So one student unfortunately had tested positive back in April. I don't know the timelines before a negative test comes in, but they've heard up to 6 months. So do we know how that might play out as they enter into Ireland?
Martin, I'll try and answer that one. I know that in a European context, post the 19th of July, anybody who has contracted COVID and has the antibodies for COVID, that they're eligible for what's called a green certificate, and therefore they're considered fully vaccinated. So it's possible that that same consideration may be extended to non-European citizens. And again, the devil will be in the detail, as we say here in Ireland, when the protocol is likely to be released, and that may not be until the 19th of July. But it's possible that somebody who's contracted COVID, who has the relevant antibodies to fight further infections, that they may be considered de facto vaccinated, because that is the case when it comes to European citizens, for the purposes of what's called the digital or the COVID certificate, which is considered the same as full vaccination.
Thanks, Patrick. Hopefully that gives some reassurance to the students. Does anybody want to take on the question about how classes are going to look in September? I know some of the students may have labs that are mandatory on campus, where other programs may not really get that model.
Realistically, classes are going to be offered on a blended basis. Therefore, some students are going to experience more face-to-face class than others. So, for example, a student who's doing something, a very practical hands-on program, say in our case, massage therapy or culinary arts, obviously it has to be done in the kitchen, it has to be done in the massage suite. Whereas if you're doing business studies, I think you'll probably have, for the first month or 6 weeks until midterm break, you're likely to have more online than in class, other than when you have courses, as what we call modules, you call courses, which are in computer labs or what have you. But the push is to get as many people onto campus as possible, other than the large lecture theatres. However, when our minister talks about large lecture classes or lecture halls, he's really thinking, I think, about UCD with 400 students or UCG with 400 students, rather than the smaller colleges, smaller universities. So I'm hopeful that the blend will be more towards face-to-face than it was at any time last year.
Thanks, Cyril. Bruce is asking, what's acceptable proof for vaccinations? I know I've had my first shot, and when you do get a vaccination shot, or what happened to me was you're given a receipt of that. So I'm assuming that might be used as proof of vaccination.
Yeah, Patrick answered that a bit further down, Martin. It's going to be whatever the national certification relating to vaccination is. I think what will happen over the next 6 weeks in particular will be a standardization of what that looks like, and an acceptance. It'll be clearly outlined what a Canadian will have in their possession, what an Irish or a European person will have in their possession. We're looking at this digital passport, basically, and you'll have on your phone, which will indicate that you've been vaccinated, or that you've had a PCR, or that you've had COVID in the last 6 months. So that's what's going to be rolled out in Europe. We'd expect similar things to be done in the US and Canada and places like that. So that's why the expectation is on the trajectory that it'll be easier rather than more difficult than outlined by Patrick earlier to get into Ireland and to get into Europe. Can I just add that someone put up the comment about Aer Lingus flight's been cancelled until September 23rd. Thanks for letting us know that. Yeah, look, there might be trickier ways to get here in the initial phase, but there's going to be plenty of routes transiting through the UK or other countries. London is obviously the biggest hub for Ireland in terms of flights, so there should be plenty of availability. But hopefully, more and more flights will be scheduled as things start to roll out. That would be the intention.
Thanks, Donald. Leah's just come on with a question about COVID testing centers and where they might be located for students coming inbound.
Yeah, well, I think most major towns, sorry, Martin, most major towns have a COVID vaccine or a COVID testing center. And indeed, most of our campuses have the vaccine centers as well. So we're all very closely located to either the testing or the vaccination where we are located. Sorry, Martin, for cutting, or Sarah for cutting across there.
Are you okay? Yeah.
Okay, guys, I think that's this section of the presentation really, and I think we're at the point where we could open up the breakout rooms. And if there are any specific questions for the gentlemen, you can jump into your respected breakout room and ask them directly about their school. Before I do that, I just want to thank everybody on behalf of KOM for joining us this afternoon. I will remain on, so if you want to come back and have a chat with us, all you have to do is exit your breakout room and you'll come back to the main room here. Just to let everybody know that we will be doing these sessions ongoing leading up to September. So this isn't your last chance to have a chat with myself or to the gentleman in Ireland. So anytime you guys need support or you're confused about something, reach out to any one of the four of us and we're here to help you. Okay. So at that point, I'm going to stop.
Sorry, Martin, equally as we said before, if any of the students or their families wanted to have a Zoom chat with any one of the three of us or our colleagues, I'm sure we can all organise that. Certainly, Tralee will, and I'm sure I can set Sligo and Carlo.
Thanks, Cyril. So up until this point, I'm going to stop the recording now. So up until this point of the presentation, there will be a recording. We will email that out to all the participants here in the next day or so. Patrick's going to kindly send over the PowerPoint that he presented with, and we'll include that. But at that note, I'll just leave it there, and then we're going to open up the breakout rooms here. Okay.